Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. I interview incredible people who've dedicated their lives to helping those who've been impacted by trauma. A big thank you to our sponsors and our guests who are supporting this show. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Shawn Mahshie. Shawn, welcome.
Thanks, Guy. Very excited to be here.
Appreciate it. Awesome. Shawn is an internationally recognized author, speaker, and self-love coach based near Washington, D.C. She specializes in helping purpose-driven women overcome burnout and self-abandonment through her signature Living in Symmetry approach. This system integrates her wheel of self-forgiveness with her expertise as a certified facilitator of the work of Byron to transform anxiety into empowered action. Her methodology is deeply informed by her own lived experience of overcoming chronic illness and personal upheaval by learning to stand in her own corner. Through her retreats and coaching, she guides clients to build the internal safety and self-solidarity needed to live with lasting peace and confidence. All right, Shawn, just a little bit about you. Before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I'm originally from a small town in Iowa. I had what looked from the outside to be a very idyllic childhood, wonderful parents, and yet it's amazing the way the brain can get wired for trauma, often passed down from their trauma. So, yeah, then by way of California and came to grad school in Washington, D.C. Now I live in a magical spot on the Chesapeake Bay where I call it Chesapeake Paradise, where I hold my retreats. And it's about 45 minutes east of Washington, D.C. and south of Annapolis, Maryland, right on the water. Couple awesome. country-like acres. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start. How did all this begin for you?
Well, started very early, I'm quite sure. And I think back on those dinner table moments, particularly after church, of all things, when my mom would just turn into this massive self-hatred and start just turning on herself with disgust and also on others. And in those moments, it was as if she had completely abandoned me. So my response was to abandon myself, do whatever it took to make it feel better for her. And I think all that, that when fight and flee aren't safe for children, they go with the other two, freeze and fawn. And I think it's easy for the brain to get wired to turn on ourselves. So for me, that really became my life story of going into shoulda, woulda, coulda. I would call it regret hell, because there was almost nothing I could do to stop the flood of shame and self-hatred, even after decades of inner work until I found what we're going to talk about. So yeah, it was, my life eventually crashed by, even though I was well known in my field, speaking on world stages with a book in that field, and still crashed into chronic illness, was on disability for 15 years. My health, marriage, and career crashed in the space of 9 months, and it was still 10 years of inner work, every kind of nutritional, Eastern, Western medicine, Ayurveda, acupuncture, the best energy work people out there. And I still couldn't stop beating myself up. And
all right, hang on. So when all this started, how old were you at that dinner table?
Oh, I'm sure it was earlier, having worked with so many women who are wired as young as 3 to know what's safe and not safe with their parents. But one that I write about in the book that's coming out soon is, I think I was 8, and just that, turning into, I'm going to become invisible, whatever it takes to please, placate, get her back. And yet I learned later, the hard way, that it wasn't her I needed to get back, or my husband, or any of the other people I had transferred that to. It was me I needed to get back. I was the one who abandoned myself, no other choices in that moment. But that's the journey I help people on now. We even have a boot camp called Get You Back.
So we're going to get there, but I just want to get a little more specific about how this unfolded for you as a young kid.
Right.
High school, what was happening for you during that time? Middle school, high school, how was this manifesting for you?
Very much the not enough story. Doing what I see so many women doing is agreeing to terms you don't want in your relationships, particularly with
Pleasing.
men. Yeah, I call them pretzel people, where we turn ourselves into a pretzel to please, placate, and put our needs last. Yeah, definitely.
So that's happening. You go to college, I'm assuming?
Yeah, college, but I was out to save the world, so only 2 years at Iowa State University. Then I joined a volunteer service organization with the Mennonite Church, even though I wasn't Mennonite, and sent me to California, where I became involved in deaf education, and that's what my career and my master's in sign language linguistics. In fact, my other book that was kind of, changed the face of deaf education back in 1995. So, to California, and from there, a marriage that just started crashing very soon.
Hang on, because why?
I would say out of my own self-hatred, not just constantly looking over my shoulder, the way I managed my time, what I said, what I did. I couldn't leave a meeting at my job without going in and finding the one thing I could beat myself up for. Either I should have said something, or I said too much, and why didn't I, and if only. And I think the brain was wired so early to replay, to really terrorize myself with images of what could have been. So.
Wow. So simultaneously, it looks like you're having this thriving career.
Beautiful life, yeah.
Beautiful life.
Beautiful life. You look, everything from childhood on has always looked good on the outside. Even the married to a professor, waterfront home, finally adopted our child from China. Everything's looking good, and I'm speaking on world stages and totally crashing on the inside.
Now, when you say crashing on the inside, what does that mean? Why did the marriage fail?
I don't, having worked with so many women, don't believe there is necessarily one reason, but I would say that lack of self-support, what I now have come to call self-solidarity, I was always giving it away, wired to we go through others. That you can almost see where codependence is born out of the childhood trauma, and we start shuttling back and forth to get those responses. So the minute things didn't go the way I planned, I would turn on myself. The minute somebody was angry or even uncomfortable, particularly my husband. So it was very easy to drain myself. And it was combined with, having had various autoimmune things along the way that kept, I believe, being exacerbated. It's almost like my body learned from my psyche to turn on itself. So physical pain, autoimmune disorders, and adrenal depletion, just blowing out adrenaline all the time through anxiety, and which is almost funny because now no physical pain, no chronic illnesses, and I'm never tired. It's a very strange thing after all those years of fatigue and overwhelm. So it just showed me how much the thinking and the way it was wired into my body. It was very somatic, always some kind of chronic condition coming up one after the other.
Were you seeking any help at this point?
Oh, yeah, lots. Yeah.
Okay. And hold on a second. And were you seeking that help because of what was happening? Like, something's wrong, I have an illness, I have a sickness, or had you connected the dots to back at that dinner table, in a sense?
I think it was both. I fairly early on learned that the should have story was completely my downfall. Even at age 3, my own daughter said, "Oh, Mommy, you said should have." So I guess I made it into a dirty word in our house. Like nobody gets to go beat themselves up because I was really wired to believe there could have been some other reality. And I believe children's brains kind of go into external blame, where everything is about judging others and wanting them to change, or internal blaming. And I got the internal side. But what I've learned is they are flip sides of the same coin, and that everyone, if you are over there being the judgmental one and feeling the pain of always separating yourself from life and others as they are, usually when we start doing this wheel of self-forgiveness work, they find they are extremely self-critical underneath all that judgment. In fact, maybe the external judgment is a protection from looking at, from experiencing their own self-hatred. But because I had gone in that direction, because of all the somatic conditions, I was able to fairly early on spot things related to the mind-body connection. I started believing it was all my way of handling stress and that I shouldn't even attend to physical things. So about 10 of them stacked up, and, an abscessed tooth, a number of things that were contributing. So it's always this dance between how do the mind and body work together? How does the trauma response get triggered in so many different ways? But yeah, I definitely was on the path. I was a seeker.
Okay, so let's start to get there. When did you realize? When did you start to get help? When did things start? Okay, this is working. Maybe I'm on this healing path. When did that happen for you?
So many wonderful self-help books along the way, particularly getting in trouble in my marriage. But there had always been a lot of abandonment fear in relationships, again, causing me to agree to things I didn't necessarily want and be afraid to leave or let the relationship fail. But I would say really mostly in my marriage. And one of the books I had read was Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway by Susan Jeffers. And those kind of affirmations and things were really helpful, and yet didn't get to and never have, as far as I've seen from my clients, the real self-hatred stuff, because I believe it's wired for survival, not for recovery. Actually, I heard Janina Fisher, one of your guests, say that our trauma is wired for survival, not recovery, and especially if your psyche believes you are helping yourself by beating yourself up, putting yourself last, making yourself less than, not trusting your intuitions. Indecisiveness was one of the really big ones, and I've almost completely recovered from that. You will find that if you know how to stop the regret held thing and stop beating yourself up, there's very little fear of making a wrong decision, because the worst outcome was what you would do to yourself anyway. It's those emotional states we fear. So I would say those wonderful self-help books along the way, and counseling, and yet I had counselors who were just basically listening and didn't have a clue, didn't really have the tools to help. So I would say the biggest breakthrough after all those years of seeking and even trying to recover from the chronic illnesses was finding the work of Byron Katie, which was just 4 questions and turn the thoughts around, and understanding how much everything was being triggered by the thinking. And
okay, so give us a little bit about Byron Katie, not too much, but what was it about her work? You said 4 questions. What were those 4 questions? And for those interested, she has been a guest on this podcast.
Right, yeah. Well, and I became one of the few in the world certified directly under her in this work over the course of 6 years. and yet then still took it further for the self-forgiveness part. But this part, I think what was so helpful, well, I actually took it further too to call it the Symmetry Principle. When I realized that whatever was upsetting me was holding the key to my path out of it, that was the beginning of the end of fear. If I could use my judgments, fears, feeling victimized, reactions to life, whatever that was, as my direct path to peace, then I figure no bad outcomes. You're either loving life or using what hurts to wake yourself up.
Give me an example.
So with the work of Byron Katie, then, to really, how so much out there we are told in the spiritual space, or particularly religion, churches will say don't judge, and yet our brain is a judging machine. It's wired for good, bad, fat, thin, smart, dumb, and so one genius thing she did was get those judgments on paper. The other wonderful thing, just in a very simple format called a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. I'm upset with blank because we actually go ahead, point the finger at them. I want them to.
Finally.
Yeah, right. Because no matter how petty, or you don't want to admit to anybody else that that's true, you get it on paper. You become the active listener to those littlest parts of you, and not shaming them and not saying you shouldn't feel that way. It's a safe space. Or, all anger, all war belongs on paper is what she would say. But anyway, that worksheet is, I'm upset with blank because I want them to, they should, I need them to, they are, go ahead, cuss words, expletives, in marriage counselor, they don't, no labels, no characterization. Go ahead and characterize them, whatever it is. And then what it is you don't ever want to experience about this again. And the trick when I first started, she was doing that in a very general way, but they moved into work in a very specific moment, a specific triggering situation. And that just makes such a huge difference from every other kind of work I've seen, because you're actually revisiting the moment. What was I thinking and believing? And then it turns out that with the question 4, once you get those thoughts on paper and you question them, is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? How do I react? Camera off the other person and what they're doing on me. No judgment, just observation. How do I react when I believe that thought? And this is the one that I hadn't seen in any other spiritual approach. Who would I be in that exact moment without that thought? Imagine the thought has been lifted. You see, you look at their little face over there, the person who's driving you crazy and feels like the serious, and you're like, oh, look at them. They're just over there believing they're thinking as well, and move right into compassion. And then you turn the thought around, and I always say that's where you find that you're doing to yourself and others what you thought was being done to you. It's the symmetry principle I talk about, is that whatever life brings is not only a perfect mirror for you, but it is created out of the lens through which you're looking. And so the gift is, whenever somebody shows up really pushing your buttons, you get to find out how they are actually your kind teacher. They are exposing a blind spot, an area. And when I say blind spots, it's always linked to childhood trauma. You don't have another way. You actually can't even see what you're doing to cause it for yourself or the way out. And I was a person who would always go in and find my part, then beat myself up and apologize and not be able to change. Well, this is finding your part without blame or shame. Just, I call self-solidarity, standing with, by, and for yourself, no matter what. You see, given what I was thinking and believing, I couldn't have acted any differently. And that's the basis for the wheel of self-forgiveness, too.
All right, let me just remind everyone, I'm speaking with Shawn Mahshie. So, Shawn, let's kind of shift a little bit. How are you working with individuals? And it's just women, correct?
I have clients that are men. I work with couples. This work works really well for men, especially if they're not into talk therapy. And yet the people we were seeming to attract to my retreats. And yeah, we've kind of tried to narrow it to women, but I'm a global mission. I know we all just don't need to be hurting so much. And there is nothing more important to me than getting it out there so that children grow up knowing this way of questioning their thinking as common knowledge, understanding the steps of the wheel of self-forgiveness so that they don't turn on themselves. They instantly find their own innocence and know how to not make themselves wrong, and that the trauma of abandoning themselves, no matter what's happening, I want so much for that to be common knowledge. It's not just for women, but women are the ones that often spot themselves in this self-deprecating, self-abandonment profile. So
So let's get specific here. How do you work with your clients? Let's use a case example. Granted, everyone's different and every case is different, but what does it look like?
Well, I really do. Well, first of all, I do very deep private coaching. And one thing that's different about that than single counseling sessions is I have text coaching in between. And often these relationships become an actual relationship where we take on a project together. They become part of my team. There becomes almost like a kind of a friendship where I get to have the feedback of having my own experience of them in real time, not just them coming in and reporting about a third party without that third party present. So that's been helpful too, to really open it up. I've seen that you've often said that the way to really help people is to completely be your human self, and where they get to see that in me too, but also see how differently I handle things than I used to, that I can risk. So in that private coaching, in my year-long mastermind group, which continues on, people become ELFs, the Embracing Life Fully program, where women come together in online groups. And it's just an amazing level of safety. That also with our retreats, I've been having 2 retreats a year since 2014. We're going on our 24th retreat, but now we're starting to do many more per year. So anyway, the way I work also, though, is to identify, are you pointing the finger out, in which case I tend to use the work of Byron Katie, or are you pointing towards yourself? Are you beating yourself up, taking too much responsibility for an outcome that belongs to someone else? If it's aimed at you, then the wheel of self-forgiveness, which is just 3 simple steps that not only find your own innocence and forgive yourself, but debunk the fears that are causing you to go into regret hell to start with. You fear something bad is happening, that, again, linked to trauma. And then we go even further than that to use what it is you find through this process about what you want from others or life, and get real specific and find ways to give it to yourself. Really, really addressing true gaps in self-love, like no cookie cutter, we're going to drink our lemon water and meditate for 20 minutes or whatever those, and yet you're still beating yourself up the whole time. Will really expose, based on what you feel you want and need from others, what it is these littlest parts of you want from yourself. So we have various processes, but mostly my no matter what way is based on those 2 pillars of the work of Byron Katie and my wheel of self-forgiveness, depending on whether the finger is pointing in or out.
It's an interesting concept. And of course, I'm guessing it can be both in and out at some points, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this a little more. How does what you're doing differ than from quote-unquote regular talk therapy?
Very much so in my mind, and it's partly what helped me quiet a very overactive brain that was constantly making connections and assigning meaning to things. With either of these processes, we really boil it down to what am I thinking and believing in that moment? And people may say, yeah, but what if the trauma is pre-language? I still find that pre-language trauma and so much of the somatic reactions in our bodies can be healed by working here and now situations that trigger the trauma response. And there's a link back to where that got wired. And we often do go back to that childhood situation and allow the child to say what never could have been said, and to have an advocate that was never there for them, and sort of to in some ways rewrite history through a simple process I do with childhood wounds. But for the most part, it boils down to becoming the observer of your thinking. But different than the usual mindfulness practices, we're going further. A lot of times those littlest parts of us that are believing something scary, they don't want us to put them on a cloud and just observe them and send them. It's like a child who's really scared about something. If you push it away and minimize its for fears, it's just going to hug your leg and scream louder. And that's chronic illness and relationship dysfunction and all of it. So what we're doing is really bringing that part up, saying, no, I see you, I want to hear you, and exposing the errors in its logic. This work neutralizes the thinking, so that if you identify a belief and you do this process on it, you have turned it around in such a way that you're way over here, have polarized belief. I need them to blank. And then you find, oh, I don't need them to. And you have as many reasons for that. I need me to, with regard to myself and with regard to them. So you find these three kinds of turnarounds that neutralize the thinking. And so it just quiets the mind. Emotional charge is just gone, even physical pain. People can say, wow, you can see still the swelling and everything, but the pain isn't there. And the same with the anger they came in with someone, or the feelings of fear or victimization have just been neutralized. So that's, for me, yes, I listen a lot, especially during private therapy. I take copious notes on the computer because what I'm looking for is not history or general themes. I'm looking to grab the exact wording of their thoughts. And then when we find the triggering situation, then we do this structured Judge Your Neighbor worksheet to really harvest the thinking. But that's by turning around your exact wording that came out of your own mind. That's why it so efficiently neutralizes things that I have been working on for years. Oh. And regret, I used to be able to lay awake that night, worry about it for weeks, still feel the stab of regret when months, years later, thinking back on a regret situation. And it can literally be gone in 5 to 20 minutes because these processes sort of just find those polar opposites. So your mind, and it's a lot of stuff too about presence, and not just the idea of presence, because so many people beat themselves up for not being able to be more present or more self-loving. Right. So yeah. So anyway, It really is moving you into it. You don't have to try to legislate your state. You try to love yourself right where you are, being totally not present.
Okay. All right. How do people learn more about what you're doing, Shawn, and everything you're doing? And before you even answer that, you have a book coming out. Hopefully it's going to be out by the time this goes live. What's the title of the book?
The title of the book is The Wheel of Self-Forgiveness, 3 Simple Steps to Unconditional Self-Love, Self-Confidence, and Self-Advocacy. The short version is just The Wheel of Self-Forgiveness. And it is just 3 simple steps.
Okay. And give us your website, how people can learn more about you.
Well, just with my name, ShawnMahshie.com, and it's an interesting spelling. But I think for right now, the most important thing, especially for practitioners to potentially even get licensed in these methods, is thewheelofselfforgiveness.com. It only has a dash in there with self-forgiveness. So
Okay.
wheelofself-forgiveness.com will take you to right now. You can download a cheat sheet of the Wheel of Self-Forgiveness, and as soon as the book comes out, that website will be taking you directly there. In fact, when you get the cheat sheet, we'll be putting your name on a list to receive information about when the book's available and be part of our book launch to get this out there to so many people who there's just an epidemic of self-criticism, and we have a way out.
Awesome. All right. We'll have all this linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Shawn, thank you so much. Inspiring. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Guy. Wonderful
All right.
meeting you.
We'll be in
Take
touch.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.